Hey guys, before we jump into this episode, I just wanted to say really quickly I apologize for my audio. There was something wrong with my microphone and now I need a new one. So the information is still good nonetheless, so please still listen. I tried to fix the audio as best as I could, but again, I apologize. Manny sounds amazing, but yeah. All right. Thank you. Now on with the episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to A Catholic's Perspective, the podcast all about being a young Catholic surviving in a secular world. I hope you guys are all doing well and enjoyed the last episode, because today I have another special guest. I say that about every guest, but for real, Manny is a very special guest. We did a YouTube video, I believe it was last year, so I will link that in the show notes below, or if you guys are watching on YouTube, I will link that below. But welcome, Manny. Thank you so much for being back.
Thank you for having me, Amber. I'm so excited to be back. I love that you preface where you're like, I say that every week, but this time, guys, this one. No, I really appreciate it. I'm humbled to be back, and I'm excited for this conversation. We're gonna be getting into some really important discussion, and we were both talking about this before we started recording, but it's necessary. So I'm just excited to dive in with you, man.
Yeah, no, I'm excited too, because I think this is a topic, again, that's so taboo in Catholic circles. I mean, you have faced ridicule for simply going on campuses and talking about this, for just literally trying to show people that it's like we can welcome but not affirm, and we can help people who are struggling with same-sex attraction, who don't know that there is another way, who don't know how to handle it. And so I think overall, this is going to be just a really fruitful discussion for those of us who maybe have no experience ministering to these people, to really make them feel welcome and understand that like God does love them, and that same-sex attraction in itself is not a sin. It's when you act on it, which is what, in general, every sin, whether that's pornography or anything. So I'm really excited to dive into this. For the people who might not have watched our last video, could you introduce yourself a little bit, give a little background?
Yeah, absolutely, Amber. So my name is Manny Gonzalez. Most people know me simply as Manny. I'm a beloved son before anything else. But there's a lot of tidbits underneath that. I'm a student. I'm currently getting my master's degree, finishing up actually, praise God, at Franciscan University of Steubenville. I
Wow.
also work here as a campus minister. And I'm also very blessed to be given the opportunity to just represent the church in a variety of levels and speak all over the nation, all over the world, just sharing my testimony of being a Catholic man who experiences same-sex attraction, who actually my story is a messy one. It's a beautiful one, but it is all over the place. There was a point where I walked away from the church. I, kind of explored the world and just what the world told me would satisfy. And ultimately, the Lord led me back here to the one who truly satisfies. And I like to think of myself as a very just real, genuine person, that I will tell it as it is. The cross is heavy. It's not easy. By the grace of God, I've been back in the church now for 6 years. I'm striving to live faithfully according to all the church's teachings on a variety of, moral issues. But nonetheless, I'm human. I'm broken. I'm weak, but I'm striving. And that's where I think sainthood is fostered. And that's what I try and speak into for the body. It's just hope and encouragement, not only for young people, but for all of us, that sainthood is not easy, specifically regarding issues of sexuality, but nonetheless, it is worth it. And it's where freedom is found. So I try to do my best to speak into that space of freedom for all others. If you experience an LGBT plus experience, or if you're just walking the Christian walk like anyone else, that there's freedom to be found in the church's greater invitations that she has in her teaching. So I'm very blessed to be here. All glory to God. So it's exciting. So
Yes. No, absolutely. I think also your story is a unique one, because we do not have very many people who are brave enough to talk about their SSA due to the fact that they feel some sort of judgment from the church, from the lay people. And I think it's important for more people to be able to share their story, and also just let people know that this is something that we talked about this before getting on air, but it is a cross. But it is something that can lead you to sainthood, for real. So I guess kind of just like jumping in, did you want to talk about your own experience with same-sex attraction, how that's kind of led you over time to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely, Amber. I mean, it was one of those things where, and this seems to be a commonality for a lot of individuals that I've countless individuals I've talked to who share similar experiences with me, come from a similar background. But so I grew up in a Catholic home, and so especially I think growing up in a religious setting, but just in general, even if I wasn't religious per se, um, there's this innate like kind of I think feeling of just like otherness whenever you have an LGBT plus experience like I do. Whenever you're attracted to the same sex, I think there's this like automatic just like yeah, just we like feeling of like I'm different, I'm othered, I'm less than, I know for me, especially growing up in a Catholic home, my parents and nobody around me said or did anything for me to feel this particular way, but I just felt so broken. Like I just felt so much more sinful than everyone else. I felt so much more just like lost and unworthy of salvation than everyone else. And so that really led me down just a lot of just isolation and suppression and just self-hatred. I think hatred for myself, hatred for God, for the church. I thought the church was so homophobic and bigoted. I thought God was just a mean, cruel God. Yeah, that really led me down just a really dark path, I think, in terms of just mental health, of just really just loathing myself. And eventually kind of, I'm summarizing a lot of things here, but eventually that led me to kind of just like reaching my breaking point. Eventually I came out to my parents, and there was that whole ordeal. And once I came out to my parents, I then kind of felt like I didn't have to live in shame anymore, because now that mom and dad knew, I had nothing to hide. So I started just embracing what the world said would fulfill me. I started dating guys, got very involved in just LGBT plus circles back home in Dallas. And yeah, whenever I tell my story, I like to emphasize that I was not miserable per se. I don't like when people act like sin is like not enjoyable. Like it's like if it wasn't, we wouldn't be
It's true.
embracing it. It's like if sin didn't feel good, then like the whole world wouldn't be like actively trying to, like actively like, it's like it feels good. And so I definitely had my moments of happiness. But I always like to emphasize there's a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is of the flesh, it's temporary, it's fleeting. But joy has a name, it's a person, it's Jesus. And I didn't know Jesus. But then by the grace of God, after a couple years living in that direction, he called me home. And it took a bit. Conversion is not overnight. It is ongoing. I'm still constantly being made new, as are you. Like this is until the day we die, metanoia. But nonetheless, the Lord had, he called me home, and I just prayed that desperate prayer. I was like, Lord, like I don't know who you are. Chris Tomlin says you're a good father, apparently. Um, so you need to start moving now, or I'm gonna give the rest of my life to letting people know you're a liar. And by the grace of God, that night things started shifting, and here we are. I mean, 6 years later. Again, I'm really giving you the Spark Notes version of all this, but yeah. I mean, since then it's been an ongoing journey. There's been a lot of pains. There's been a lot of hurt. There's also been so much glory and goodness. And as you said, Amber, I love how you said it. But like this is just like any other cross or any other, like just in general brokenness that we experience as human beings. It is an avenue for grace if we allow it to be. It's an avenue for sanctity. It's an avenue for the Lord to come in and just do something absolutely extraordinary if we allow Him. And I would like to think that over the past 6 years, not I would like to think that's actually discrediting the Lord. The Lord has done so much good by the grace of God through me just allowing slowly. Again, it didn't happen overnight. It's been continuously learning to like give this part of myself to Him, but also just so many other parts of myself to Him, and just allowing that to foster a friendship and an intimacy that from that intimacy, the Lord has just blessed so many and also blessed me and just shown me His heart in a way that I don't think I would have been able to see or taste if I didn't take up my cross and follow Him. And so, it's been a joy, friend. I don't know. I always tell people the Catholic Church is like the only institution, arguably, that invites our brothers and sisters who have LGBT plus experiences into actual love. So, like, I've experienced a love here that I know it surpasses all others. So, I've never felt more loved and more free and more at peace. But I've also felt so much heaviness, and there's been seasons where I've also really struggled. And again, that's okay though. Like, that's that's the narrow way. You know, it's seasonal. The narrow way is seasonal. You
Yeah,
know, um,
it's difficult for sure.
yeah, but it's good, man. And yeah, I truly am just very alive here, and the Lord is so good. And yeah, to him be all the glory, friends. So that's a good synopsis of, I guess, where we can start. I'll let you kind of pick
Yes.
that apart. You can dissect.
A
Dr.
list
Amber,
of
go ahead.
quotes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I think it's really important too because we need to emphasize that sin is sin. And of course, there's mortal sin and venial sin or whatever. But when people think one mortal sin is more taboo than another, it's like really, I think part of it has to do with our culture today and just the saturation of the LGBTQ plus and the degeneracy that's kind of seeped into the culture and stuff. And so people don't know how to separate that with people who are like you, Manny, who come back into the faith and are actively living a very Catholic life. They don't know how to separate the two. What are some like struggles you've kind of faced through that, if you have any?
yeah. I mean, for starters, I think, yeah, the reality is, as you said, Amber, and this is something that I constantly call out if you follow me on social media, but I think sometimes we really struggle in the church, to separate ideologies from persons, or to separate
Mhm.
even just sin, like you said, like sinful acts from the persons themselves. And I think that has even seeped in, unfortunately, to my own experience in the church. And let me expound on that. But basically, like I think a lot of times, because we will look at, again, it's like you said, like we can look at objective sinfulness or objectively sinful behavior and be like, okay, that's, again, acknowledge it as sinful, acknowledge that it's not okay, whatever. But then at the same time, I think so often people will automatically see that and be like, oh, sinful behavior, sinner. I'm going to treat this person as sinner, less than, leper, whatever. Stay away from me. Don't want to talk to you. Can't engage in conversation. And then it becomes this whole like leper mentality. And that's for just people who are outside of the church, but then let alone for those of us who are in the church who carry these experiences, who, experience, same-sex attraction, but are striving to live according to church teaching. Then unfortunately, that can even seep in and affect people like us, even though it's like I'm doing every, like, I guess you could say, if I hate using this language, but like almost like I'm checking the box, like I'm trying to live a faithful life, I'm trying to do everything right, just like you are. And nonetheless, that's almost still not enough, apparently. And so sometimes, I would be lying if I would say overall the church is very hospitable, um, towards people like me, and we're continuously learning too. I think there has to be a sense of empathy from people like me, of like people are trying to understand, and it's like you said, this is taboo. Everyone's trying to get it. Everyone's trying to learn how to love better. And for the most part, over the past 6 years, my experience in the church has been very, again, very hospitable, very positive. People are very just kind and want to walk with me on my journey, are very encouraged and very supportive. But yeah, unfortunately, I would say the struggles, quote unquote, would be like, yeah, every once in a while you'll come across that person who's a little less well catechized, or maybe doesn't carry as much of a sense of empathy, towards people who look like me. And yeah, that can be very heartbreaking and sometimes very discouraging. But nonetheless, that's where then you just need people around you to speak truth, speak the life of Jesus over you, the heart of Jesus over you, that's not his heart for you. That's not, because I think, honestly, I think this can go for, I don't know if it's comparable to the same degree, but I think for a variety of topics. I mean, if we think of pornography, for example, some people, if you struggle with pornography, will, be very compassionate and very like empathetic and very much so like, okay, like I want to walk with you in this, I want to meet you there. But then there are others who are like, you're disgusting, like to hell with you, I think it goes for, eating disorders, body image issues, pornography. I mean, just all kinds of brokenness in our church. Unfortunately, we do have some individuals who will innately respond to the brokenness, even if it's not, there's not something actively bad going on there, and nonetheless be like hostile.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I would like to think that that's not the case. And if it is the case, we're at least trying to have a better sense of empathy. So yeah, I don't know your thoughts on that, Amber, initially, but that's my, off the bat, at least, that's my initial, like when you say, what's a struggle you've
Yeah.
experienced here?
I think that perspective is really important because a lot of times I think there's too much emphasis put on struggle and we don't
Mm,
really realize that. I don't even realize it sometimes where it's just
mm.
like, oh my gosh, this poor person's struggling. But in reality, some quote unquote struggles are just kind of a part of life. They don't
Yeah.
necessarily need to be categorized as like trauma or a struggle. It's more of just like, oh, this is just how things are. And sure, it's a little difficult right now, but it's not really difficult overall. And like you said, you run into one or two few people. I think of, you brought up pornography, and I think of my friend Bree Solstat. She made pornography for a very very
Oh
long time,
wow.
and then she converted to the Catholic Church.
Mm,
And when she converted, she might have made the mistake of talking about it on Twitter. And you and I had this whole conversation before the cameras started rolling about Catholic Twitter. And she just got dragged through the mud.
mm,
Like it was awful. And
mm,
so I guess because most of the most horrible experiences I've witnessed are on Catholic X or Twitter,
mm,
is like just this profound like hatred and hostility towards anyone who's trying to repent. And obviously the people who are giving that hatred, that's not from Christ, that's not from Jesus. He doesn't hate, he has righteous anger, of course, towards
yeah.
things that are injustices. But to be hateful, to say the things that I've seen people say to her,
Mm,
it's just like insane to know that people would ever feel comfortable saying something like that to another
mm,
human being. But I do think, again, in itself, like there are those crosses that sometimes we do have to bear, and sometimes it's a lesson from the Lord to give us humility, however difficult that might be to understand in the moment. And we want to defend ourselves, and we want to be like, "What are you talking about? Like, I'm not like that." Blah 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 blah. But to just either not respond or just say, "I'm praying for you," and not to try to defend yourself or try to engage, because I think that doesn't help either for either one of your souls. I mean, I think they're doing damage to their soul, but you don't have to allow that damage to also seep into your soul and to corrupt yourself with them.
mm.
So I always like to preface with people, like, if you're getting a lot of hate online like I do, or like Bree does, or I'm sure Manny, you've gotten some hate online too at some
Had my
point,
fair share. Yeah.
that it's like you just you have to address things for sure. I think addressing stuff for their soul, for the sake of their soul, is important, but to engage solely to defend yourself or to solely try and um, you know uh, I don't know, I think just accepting the humility is a lot more difficult in the moment, but it God gives you those graces if you accept them. So anyway, that's just my little tangent, but I was
Yeah.
yeah.
Love.
It's hard. It's really hard being online.
It's we are the online space. Yeah, Amber. We've talked about this plenty, but I mean, yeah, I think we need to navigate with a sense of prudence and humility, and yeah, keeping it's like you said, keeping Christ at the focal point, and remembering, yeah, who we're doing it for, not making it about us. That we need to win an argument, or that we need to prove something, or that it's like foremost, like, are we desiring for souls to encounter the love of Jesus Christ, or are we desiring to just be able to say that we corrected someone? You know,
Exactly.
um,
But
but
I
I'm
was
sorry.
based.
Yeah, but I was based. But I did it. I did. Yeah, I proved the point. It's hard, man. It's hard being humble as a disciple, but we got to be like the little ones. We got to be little. So I'm sorry though. I interrupted. You were like mid thought, and I had to speak into Catholic X, and then I totally just cut you
I
off.
have
So
no
please.
idea. See, that's why I love these types of podcasts, because they're conversational. See, this is
Good. Okay. Good.
I have the memory of a goldfish. So,
You're like, I have
um,
no idea what I was gonna say.
nope, not at all.
Okay,
So,
I mean, I can I add a comment then to what you
yeah,
were saying
go
then?
ahead.
Okay, awesome. But like, you guys are witnessing raw, real conversation here in action, which I
For
love.
real. No editing.
No editing. But no, I think too, Amber, like, speaking to what you're saying too, I think it's so important. Like, again, so I'm getting my master's in catechetics and evangelization. Something that we're continuously taught is that catechetics. So catechetics is basically the art of delivering the truth of the gospel to the world, and the art of just like, because it really is like, and like the Lord shows, like, there's a obviously he's not limited to a certain method or to a certain form, but nonetheless, like, the way that we proclaim the gospel to the world, it's not that it needs to be calculated per se, but at the same time we need to be prudent and mindful, and again, because we're doing this for souls. And so it's like we have to sit back and be like, okay, how is this soul going to encounter the truth and the love of Jesus Christ? And every soul is different and every setting is different. So we need to take all those things into consideration. But one thing that we're kind of like is kind of across the board honed in on when it comes to the church and just evangelization is the reality too of like relationship, and that relationship is the best context for delivering truth and for calling people higher and for holding people accountable, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, when you even look at the gospels or things like that, like the Lord did not just walk up to people and be like, like he didn't walk up to the woman at the well and be like, like whore, like that's not, he didn't call her by her sin. He called her by her name. He said, woman. He engaged with the person before he jumped into the, everything else, and so it's like, I think too, the online space can be such an easy avenue for us to just lose sight of that and forget that, forget the relationship, forget the person, to just be like, again, I see, like with your friend Bree, be like, I see, first of all, that disgusts me that even happened. Like, that's so not the heart of Jesus that she experienced that. And that breaks my heart for her. Praise God, she's back. But nonetheless, like with your friend, rather than seeing her and immediately, again, just throwing comments, deciding to correct her when she doesn't even, you haven't introduced yourself. You don't know her name. She doesn't know your name. You guys don't. Rather than that, it's like, okay, maybe DM the person, maybe be like in a sense of charity, in a way that's charitable. Like if you're going to leave a comment in a way that is, like, hey, human person, hello, like, I know you're well intended, whatever. Like, it's like we lose sight of that. And we just think that, I think it's so easy to hide behind a screen and lose that context of relationship, because it's not relational. Online spaces are not, I mean, it's not relational. It's all, minimized. It's all limited. And so I think it's very easy for us to then just think that we're doing it and we're evangelizing. In actuality, it's like not the most effective way, especially when it comes to harder truths, man. Like truths regarding like picking up your cross in a way, like for example, like the church's teaching on homosexuality, like to tell someone that they have to potentially, most likely, be a single celibate for the rest of their life. That's not something you just drop in the comment section. It's like, that requires trust and love in a context of friendship where they know you love them and you will their good, and that you're not trying to hurt them and that you're willing to walk with them in that and be with them in that and love, not just a simple, hey, celibacy, singlehood, congrats, enter, walk away. It's like, that's not, we just have to be mindful of those things,
Yeah, it's definitely not ministering to somebody when you're just kind of like shoving things on them, but not willing to walk with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's kind of where we lose a lot of it. Like you were saying, on social media, what happens is people just become so disconnected in general, despite the term social media. So
irony.
Yeah, a little bit. And it's just the fact that like I mean, like, I feel like I've kind of been guilty of this to an extent, especially on Twitter where there's limited characters. Well, not anymore, but there used to be. And it can be really difficult. When I post on my own page, I'm like, take it as you will. If people comment, I'm like, okay, well, I'll like kind of engage with you a little bit and like give you resources, this or that. But I found that the real evangelizing, the real like counseling and all that really comes from the emails that I get. When people send me a private email, sometimes they send me help sections for my help segments on YouTube, where I have these like people send me in like, help, I need help with this and advice, and I kind of give it on YouTube. But I get tons and tons of emails, and I have to catch up on them. I'm so sorry, guys. But I get tons of emails just about personal situations, prayer requests, and to have more of a private connection with somebody as opposed to a public connection. And all of those social norms are kind of put on both of you when you're in the social media forums and things. You can't really be honest. You can't, because then other people want to jump in and be like, oh, well, you're a bigot then, or you're affirming sin. And even if you're not, so it's not even a private conversation that you can have. And I try to envision it as if I'm getting coffee with a friend, and then 50 strangers just come up to our table and start being like, I can't, like they were just eavesdropping on our conversation. Like, I can't believe, without knowing anything about us, our conversation, or anything that was said before. And so I think it's important for people to kind of put that into perspective and realize that real conversations happen in private. Like you're saying, DMs, emails, whatever it is, it's like that is really how you are going to change hearts. Like,
Yeah.
that's when Brie was going through all of that stuff. I pretty sure I DM'd her and I was just like, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I've had other friends go through, like, and I don't even know these people in person, but it's like one of my friends, her baby was in the hospital, and I DM'd her and I was like, I hope your baby's okay. I hope you guys are doing well. Like, just trying to engage the humanity, and
Absolutely.
inside, and understand that we're not, yeah, we're hiding behind a screen, but there's a person there. There's a soul behind that screen.
Yeah. A soul, and also like I love everything you said, Amber. A soul, but also like yeah, like a person with real, I mean, think of, again, going back to what I was saying earlier in the episode, how I experienced a lot of shame, a lot of self-hatred. Like, it's also a person with real hurts, with real baggage, with real yeah, just like XYZ. Like, it's a heart that's delicate. The human heart is delicate. We all carry, I'm not speaking, when I say baggage, I want to clarify, when I say baggage and trauma, I'm not talking about like, oh, like those gays, they have trauma. Like, no, I'm saying like we all have baggage, we all have wounds, we all have things that need to be healed, we all have talents, we all have gifts. Like, this is the complexity of the human heart. It's beautiful, it's hurting, it's all of these things. And so when there's a human person there, there's a heart there. And it's a heart that, I mean, so many times when we sin, we're sinning out of places of just longing, that we all just want to belong, we all just want to feel love, we all just want to feel seen. It doesn't matter what that sin looks like. Like, oftentimes that is the underlying desire. And so it's like also being able to, like, can I, and this is where the challenge comes, I think, for us as disciples, but like, can I be empathetic enough, and can I carry the heart of Jesus enough in this moment to look at this person and see, like, okay, maybe objectively what they're doing, the behavior they're engaging in is not, it's sinful, and it's not in accordance with their will, with their good, and XYZ. But nonetheless, can I still see that this is a person that the Lord died for, that he desires relationship with, that very likely might or may not even desire a relationship with him, but just doesn't know how to navigate it, or doesn't know that they want it. Because we're all made for our maker. At the end of the day, we're all made for love, capital L, love. We all desire that, even if we don't recognize that that's what we desire. And so it's like, can I carry the heart to recognize this person, even if they don't realize it, they're just looking for fulfillment. They're just looking for satisfaction that can only be found in Jesus. But nonetheless, like, can I, as someone who knows Jesus, like, be Jesus to them? And that, like, it's so hard to navigate that, but it's truly what we're called to do as disciples. And I want to emphasize, is not to say we can't and should not, because we have to. Nonetheless, still, like, when there's evil, we call it out. When there's injustice, we call it out. When accountability needs to be had, accountability needs to be had. So I'm not here to mitigate that, nor am I here to also mitigate the reality that we do need public evangelists who are more blunt and who are more, like, able to just vocalize the reality of sin. Like, absolutely, sin is real, and hell is real, and we can't deny that or run away from that. But at the same time, nobody is destined for hell, right? Like, everyone, salvation is available for everyone, if they, like, obviously, like, desire faith in Jesus Christ and pursue him and his church and whatnot. So, like, are we willing to extend that invitation? Or are there certain people that we're just going to automatically be like, to hell with you? And it's like, yeah, that's where it's like, do you carry the heart of Jesus, or is that you? So yeah.
I definitely think that's a huge issue these days, where people will say they speak on behalf of Jesus, or they will say something on behalf of Jesus, and it's just not something Jesus would ever say or condone. And I think that's another issue with people who are new to the church. They see us as the body of Christ, because we are, but they don't understand that some of the body of Christ are corrupt. I mean, there was a Judas in the disciples, and you don't leave Jesus because of a Judas, but they are out there, and Jesus has warned us that there will be wolves in sheep's clothing. And so to understand that one person does not, or a group of people even in the church, do not dictate Jesus when they are wrong. It really comes down to knowing the faith yourself, understanding Jesus yourself, having your own personal relationship with Jesus, and not trying to get that relationship through people who could be corrupt or could be sinful, or are sinful, because we all are.
Right.
Because people will always disappoint in one way or another. There's always going to be something that we don't completely I guess, fulfill. We don't always keep our promises. We don't always speak truth. Sometimes we get irritated, we get annoyed. And so it's important that you have a strong understanding of what the church teaches about SSA, about all sins in general, mortal sins and venial sins, and that you are strong in that. Because if you know the truth, you can't be wavered. And I think that's the main thing, is being kind of just put in, I don't know, just being like confident in the church's teaching and what it believes, and knowing that you fit into that. And no matter what anybody says, if it's against what the church says, well, it's not true.
Yeah.
And just knowing truth, I think, gives us a lot of confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two things to say to that, or just speaking to that. I think the first is going back to kind of like what you said, the classic, like you can't, don't leave the apostles because of Judas, or that the reality that, as you said, both in our leaders and in our lay people, like in both populations, we have individuals who unfortunately, the sin exists there, and we're all sinners, we're broken, and some it manifests in a way that is very harmful and hurts people. And something that I found that's been helpful is, amidst that, it's like you said, like the reality of like, this does not reflect Jesus' heart. Nonetheless, though, still being able to be empathetic and even apologize, like be like, look, this doesn't represent the Lord and his church, but at the same time, this was somebody who was in the church. So to a degree, this was the church, like not the magisterium church, but this was the lay church. This was the body church. And therefore, like, you have been hurt and I'm sorry. And being able to, like, on behalf of the church, on behalf of the faithful, on behalf of Jesus Christ, like, you didn't deserve that. Like, you didn't, because we have to acknowledge, like, there are genuine injustices. Like, God knows, with the abuse scandals, all these, like, they're with priests who are just like saying things that are flat out heretical. Like, there are a lot of injustices going on. And it is also, I think, just as important that it's like you said, emphasize that that's not Jesus, but at the same time also acknowledge the reality that, like, but that was somebody who was supposed to represent Jesus and they failed. And so being able to then make amends for that and be like, no, like, I'm sorry. You had to, like, acknowledge their pain, the pain that was caused, acknowledge the suffering, especially if it's somebody who's a victim of something that was actually, like, very grave and injustice, and be like, I'm sorry, you didn't deserve that. Like, that is, as a Catholic, I'm ashamed that happened. I'm sad that happened. The Lord didn't rejoice in that. I don't rejoice in that, and like, being able to have that empathy is so, I think, healing in many ways. So that was the first thing I was going to say. I don't know if you want to speak into that before I get into the other thing I was going to get into. But
I was really quick. I just want to say that vulnerability is so important. I know so many people think that that's weakness, but being able to be vulnerable with somebody and just be like, what you're saying, to say, like, I'm so sorry this has happened, or to admit when you're wrong and be like, hey, I'm so sorry that I've done this. To be vulnerable online is, a lot of people think, is like suicide almost, in a way, like social suicide, because people will, kind of take that as a weakness, but it's not, it's really not. And I think, that was just my thing, where I'm like, vulnerability online is something, and authenticity, those two things are something that is severely lacking in the online spaces. So we need more of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, in general, like, we don't want to be sold, again, especially, we were talking about this off camera, but like this glamorized Christianity where it's like, that, oh yeah, like, I'm Catholic and everything's yay, peaches and cream, and I love it. It's like, we can love our faith, and we can love the walk, and we can enjoy the journey. And again, like, this is meant to be resurrected life, right? Like, we're meant to, like, joy is a fruit of the Spirit, peace is a fruit of the Spirit. Like, these are things that's like, we need to, not need to, we in this space walking with Jesus, like, we're bound to experience these feelings in the sense of, like, because we're living with the Spirit. But at the same time, the cross, the reality of the cross, right? And this is, as Catholics, we know you can't have the resurrection without Good Friday, the classic youth group saying. But it's like, the cross is heavy. And if we're going to say carry your cross, we have to acknowledge the reality of that. And I don't want you to sell me some glamorized, like, half, like, don't sell me a fake version of the cross. Like, I want to know, like, it's the nitty gritty. It hurts. There's splinters. It's like, it's bloody. It's, like the crucifixion. It is a bloody image. Why? Because, like, that is the reality of the narrow way, that is hard. And so I think it's important, and I'm sure you and I can both speak into this, like, when you're online, at the same time, there's prudence of what you share. So
Mhm.
vulnerability does not equate to trauma dumping. Like,
Yes.
don't at the same time, and then for the sake of vulnerability in the church or whatever, trauma dump or bear all your wounds or share things that quite simply don't need to be shared. Like for somebody who especially speaks on sexuality and things like that, I'm also not going online and telling people, if I stumble or, times that I might struggle with lust. I'm not at the same time doing that because there's still like you can say you still struggle or you're still like battling without like getting into the details that people
Yes.
don't need to hear,
Yes.
and that goes for anything, any kind of sin or struggle. But at the same time, so I think it's being prudent in what vulnerability looks like in the online space, but nonetheless not being afraid to not be fake. Yeah, it's like don't just paint this pretty. We already have enough of that in the world, and we're not supposed to look like the world, right? We're the church. So it's like, don't look like the world. You don't need to act like everything's, the typical social media, that your feed is beautiful and everything's great and I love my, like, yeah, it's like, don't be afraid to, sure, like if you want to post a reflection that's a little more raw or a little more, whatever, like go for it. Again, pray on it, be prudent, discern if that's what the Lord's calling you to share. But yeah, we need more of that in these spaces. And I think we're seeing more of that, which brings me hope that we're seeing more and more people unafraid. Because I honestly think vulnerability can be virtuous, because it shows humility, that shows a human being that's willing to recognize, like, I am flawed, I'm affected by sin, but I need a savior and you do too. And like, let's do this together. And that's exciting.
Yeah, and that comes with prudence, though. Of course. I mean,
Yes. Oh
yeah,
my gosh. Yes.
I wrote out a tweet yesterday because there was like in like one, gosh, what was it? I think in like one scroll, there were so much like trauma dumping and everything. And I said, I love Catholic and pro-life influencers, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of them overshare on personal topics. Like there is a way to discuss certain personal topics, but still not oversharing. I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable.
I love what you said, you're like, is it just me or
Just
yeah,
not.
no, I do. Again, I think this is where we need to be cautious, especially if you start to develop a bigger platform like you and I have, like by the grace of God, like if there starts to be like more and more people listening, there needs to be a prudence. I think even like it's good to find like a mentor, accountability partner, or somebody who can even like keep an eye on a page and be like, hey, like, like, is this, from the Lord or is this from you, and like kind of, yeah, we're all actively learning what that threshold is. Because
Trent's
yeah,
my
I
accountability partner.
the what? I'm sorry.
Trent is my accountability.
Trent is your account. But honestly, I mean, that's good. I also have people who are spiritual mentors who have, been doing this a lot longer than me, who have way bigger platforms than me, who can like genuinely sit me down and be like, man, like I've been called out before in ways I need to be, where they're like, Manny, like, I don't know if that's something you should be sharing, or I don't know if that's a part of your heart. Like, we don't want to, at the same time, in the name of vulnerability, wear our hearts on our sleeves,
Yeah.
because your heart is sacred. And it's sacred in the sense of like, it's a deep part of your personhood, and that's where you hold everything. And the deeper you go in your heart, the fewer people should be allowed in my opinion. It's like the
Yes.
Lord and close, your best friend, your spouse, whatever. Like, it's like there should be thresholds and there should be levels and layers of who gets into what. And I think the ones that you share with social media, that layer should be one of the very outer layers, where it's not your deepest, darkest sins and secrets, because I don't think that that's something that a stranger has the privilege to hold. I think that's something that, yeah, you should carefully discern who has the privilege to hold you and meet you there. So
I think that's a good exercise in emotional chastity.
Absolutely. Yeah, the good old emotional chastity. That we all, it's so funny for me that I think sometimes as Catholics, we're like so quick to, I rant about this all the time with people, but especially in college, you see, like, as somebody who ministers to college students, like, you see this all the time where as Catholics, we're like, well, I'm not like sleeping with them. Like, I'm like they'll be like, I'm not like sleeping with the person. But then I'm like, okay, but are you like emotionally sleeping with them? Because just because you're not like physically, sexually like active with someone doesn't mean you're not giving yourself entirely away to them in a way that's unchaste, just in a different sense. So it's like, yeah, it's totally the same, where it doesn't even need to be romantic or sexual in the setting, but just in general, like, I think sometimes we're very imprudent with our hearts, where, yeah, we're like, oh, I'm not like doing anything wrong. Like, there's nothing physical going on. I'm not like doing it, but it's like, no, but you're like oversharing. Like, it's like, you need to like, definitely, there's lines. And it's not to hold you down. And it's not because the church doesn't, or anyone doesn't want you to, get deep with people. It's on the contrary, it's invitation to deeper love, that like, it's a privilege to go into those deeper parts of your heart. So So it's like the Lord wants you to like, carefully discern like who to allow into that space because it's delicate and you deserve to be honored there. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's so important that we exercise emotional chastity in every area of our life. And, in general, I think oversharing has become such a big part of social media. And if you have a story, everybody wants to know the nitty gritty details. I mean, women have posted their literal births on the internet, and I'm like,
you're like,
thank you for letting me know what to expect one day, but also I don't need that visual. And it's just like part of me wonders if that in itself is a form of pride and being able to show like this is what I've accomplished, this is what I've gone through, this is what I've experienced. And I've definitely shared a lot about my testimony in general about the self-harm and about eating disorders, but I've never gone in depth with that because not only could it be triggering to some, I don't like the word trigger, but not only could it be upsetting to some people who have gone through it, but it also wasn't healthy for me to continue reliving that. And it was easier for me to kind of be like, this was a part of my life and not have to go through all the awful details, but still be able to get it across that, yes, it was horrible and people all also struggling with this and there's hope for that, but focusing more on the hope as opposed to the trauma. Absolutely. Too many people just live in their trauma and they use it as an excuse to overshare or to be bitter or to do, whatever. And in reality, it's like, that's never going to actually heal you. Only Christ can do that. And no matter what the sin is, no matter what the trauma is, no matter what the struggle or whatever it is, it's like only finding peace, growing in grace and virtue, and following Christ and carrying that cross is going to truly give you fulfilling peace and happiness. And so I think also a lot of people don't know, with going back to kind of like our SSA thing, a lot of people don't actually know where to turn.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have any advice for those who might be struggling with it, for where they could go, who they could reach out to, who specifics. I can put it in the show notes, but do you have advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Amber, I love that you turned this back to our topic of like homosexuality, because I actually was thinking to myself as we were having the conversation earlier, I was like, we like totally have not talked much about homosexuality, which is like so funny because it's what the Lord, obviously we trust that the Lord is doing what he wants to do and he's having us talk about what he wants us to talk about. But nonetheless, it's good that we're off the cuff. It's good that nonetheless we're circling back. Yeah, I mean, I think for starters, if you or someone but specifically if you are listening and you have an LGBT plus experience and you're again like trying to navigate like what this, you're trying to navigate that weird crossroad of like sexuality and faith and like living in the church. I think for starters, I just want to here now tell you that you're loved and that the Lord desires intimacy with you and that he desires friendship with you and that you are not scandalizing him. He's not scandalized by you, by any struggle, any brokenness of the human person. Like, it doesn't scare the Lord. The Lord's not scared of us. And he's not scared of you. Also just the reality of the church's teachings, that the church teaches that the attractions themselves are not sinful, as Amber was saying earlier. So if you are experiencing attraction, you are not actively sinning. Now, granted, if you're lusting, I mean, it's the same with heterosexual lust. Lust is an entirely different story. But if you just experience an attraction, you're not actively sinning. So like, I just want to speak there foremost. Like, if you are just experiencing same-sex attraction, you just like don't know what to do, and you're like, where do I go? Like the Lord desires relationship with you. You are called to sainthood like everyone else. You are no less exempt. Your life, I won't lie to you, like our lives, it's a very particular call and it's a very unique, I think, image of sainthood for us. But nonetheless, like, we're called to greatness and goodness. And so I think for their starters, just diving into like, okay, what does the church actually teach about this? It's very daunting, but the catechism has 3 paragraphs and that's it on this, which is like, I think super terrifying, but also so beautiful. Because if you read them, it's paragraphs 2357 through 2359. You can literally just Google like catechism homosexuality. Will you? And but there are 3 paragraphs, and they, in my opinion, are so hopeful. They talk about chastity. They also talk about how we, people like us, so people who experience same-sex attraction in the church, are called to be walked with respect, compassion, sensitivity. That's literally the language in the catechism. So that's like really hopeful that, like, again, the church doesn't desire you to be like discriminated against. It actually also says no unjust discrimination in the catechism. So yeah, like you are like called to be walked with and loved on just like everyone else. And then also my favorite thing is at the end of that very last paragraph, 2359, the very last sentence says, those of us who experience same-sex attraction, if we take up our cross, if we strive to pursue virtue, this is the language of the catechism. It says, in quotes, we can and should gradually approach Christian perfection. So we can and should gradually become saints. And that is love. Like, that is the opposite of homophobia. That's the opposite of hate. Like, again, the Catholic Church is calling you to love. So it's like you are called to love. Again, it's going to look different. It's not necessarily going to be a romantic expression of love or a sexual expression of love like, you know, a lot of other people experience, but nonetheless, like, this love is good. So like, I would encourage you, dive into the catechism, there's different resources out there that really expound upon church teaching on homosexuality in a way that's really beautiful. Father Mike Schmitz does a beautiful job. He actually has a brother who identifies as gay that he actually has like a book on it called Made for Love. It's just a beautiful, just diving into it in a really beautiful, gentle way. Jason Everett has some really good stuff on it. I mean, obviously you can check out my stuff if you want to, but there's also a great cloud of witnesses rising. There's like beautiful people. Like, I have friends like there's like Kim Zember and like Hudson Biblo and like different people who also are like witnesses to this life lived out. And then there's also beautiful communities out there. Like there's one that I love called Eden Invitation, like the Garden of Eden, and then Invitation. They're a beautiful apostolate within the church with hundreds of disciples who all have like a variety of LGBT plus experiences, but in one way or another desire to live virtuous lives in accordance with church teachings. And it's a beautiful just family that you can always get plugged in there. Yeah, so there are resources, and we're continuing to grow and we're continuing to get more. But nonetheless, if you are in this place where you're like, I want to be Catholic, but I don't know where to start, do your research, dive into the church's teaching, dive into witnesses, you know, get some hope there. I would even recommend like sharing with people, you know, like if there's somebody close to you that you think you can trust, that you know will walk with you in a way that's holy and good and that will encourage you in sainthood, like share. Like, the Lord doesn't want you to walk alone. Jesus Christ himself, the Word incarnate, did not carry his cross alone. He had a Simon of Cyrene. You need one too. I need one too. Amber needs one too. We all need individuals to walk with us on this journey. So like, don't be afraid. You don't have to tell the world. You don't have to tell everyone. You're not again, it's a sacred part of your heart. You're not obligated to tell anybody. But like, discern, like, is there somebody in my life or some people in my life that I desire to get vulnerable with in this way, and to walk with me in here, and to hold me accountable, and to speak life where life needs to be spoken, you know, like, those are beautiful things. And that's where I've really encountered the Lord, I think, in those relationships. So that's a few tidbits. That's at least my initial vomit there. So
I think that's important, because I don't think there's many, I don't think people really know where to look. In the sense, I definitely had that too sometimes, where I'm like, okay, I know that there has to be resources out there for this one thing or this other thing, whether I'm looking it up for myself or another person, but it's like, it's so hard to find sometimes, especially good ones, if you don't know anybody involved in it. And I have many Simons of Cyrene, I must say.
Yeah.
I have multiple. I have my spiritual director. We got Trent Horn. We got all of them at this point.
You're like, no, literally. I was actually like literally just talking to Amber about this before we got on the call. But I was even like, I think I'm gonna get a counselor soon, because it's like, yeah, we need those different people, friends. You know, if your spouse, spiritual director, a counselor. Like, yeah, we need, like, again, it doesn't matter who you are, how holy you might think you are. Like, the Lord desires you to be walked with by other people. You can't white knuckle Christianity. You can't do this alone. Like, we all need a Simon, and that's okay. You know.
I mean, the saints had saints. I mean, the saints make saints, and iron sharpens iron. And I mean, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Clare of Assisi, and then her sister, St. Agnes of Assisi, St. Francis helped them get into the convent. There was like this whole shenanigan where they cut her hair. There was like, it was like, all I thought was like three best friends literally being like, okay, so this is how we do it.
But what's so beautiful about what you just said, Amber, before every one of those names, you said the title saint. It shows, though, that nonetheless, they all ended up achieving sainthood, because they all together met each other in their brokenness. Obviously, it looked different because, you know, there's different dynamics going on there. You know, like, I know that was also like men and women, so there's probably some boundaries there. But like, nonetheless, like, they all met each other in their brokenness and weren't afraid to walk with each other and love each other there. And now they all have saints before their
Yep.
name, the title of saint. So it's like, why can't we do the same? You know?
Exactly. And I think there's so many saints to give us an example that, to give us multiple examples, that there's really a friend for everybody, you know, in heaven, who
Yeah.
can hold your hand and walk with you. And no matter what it is, I mean, so many. Every day I'm learning about a new saint. I'm like, oh, you exist. Hello.
Yeah, and like that's why honestly, even like when it comes to the topic of like homosexuality, like I'm here to give witness to reality that this life is possible and it's good and it's vibrant and it's beautiful and like I know so many people. Again, there's a cloud of witnesses that are hidden, but also there are some public witnesses as well, like some of the ones I named earlier. But like again, that's why if you are someone who's listening, especially who experiences this yourself or who knows someone for that matter, like don't be afraid to dive into those witnesses to see, because we want somebody to look at and to look up to and to see like, okay, this is possible. This isn't like happy and joyful. Like, because we look at the world and there's a plethora of examples of, you know, gay couples and gay celebrities and gay this and gay, you know, like we can look at the world and there's so many examples of like that side of things. But then I think it can sometimes feel very daunting that we can look at the church and be like, okay, like I don't really know, like, is chastity worth it? Is this life, like, is celibacy going to be fulfilling? And so it's like, no, like, like dive in. Like, there are some beautiful witnesses that are public. There are a lot more hidden witnesses than we realize. I think sometimes it is the most beautiful thing when you share with someone, then you hear them say, like, I too struggle with this, or I too experience this. And this is beyond, you know, an LGBT experience. This can be like any kind of, you know, brokenness in the human person that, yeah, like it's like when you get to hear someone else say, like, I get this, I myself experience this, or I know someone who experiences this, like you'd be surprised, man. The church is a lot more connected in its brokenness than we realize, you know? So
It's true. It's true. I think a lot of people don't realize how many people are truly willing to walk with them in whatever they're struggling with. It doesn't even have to be sin. It could be a hardship with family. It could be, you know, just the struggles of trying to be on the narrow path in general. I mean, there are a lot, but there's so many joys too. And I think a lot of the times we focus naturally on the negativity, but the positivity is where we really need to focus and put our efforts and our energy into, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to give us eternal life, you know, and joy at the end of the day. And like you said earlier, joy has a name and its name's Jesus, you know? Amen. So it's important 100%. But yeah, I guess that kind of just wraps up our episode. Is there any last minute thing you wanted to say or anything we didn't get to talk about yet?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, obviously, don't give me the invitation to talk about things I want to talk about, because we'll be here another hour. But yeah, I guess like in conclusion, again, just like an affirmation of just like, in summary, you know, like regardless of what what you experience, what your past looks like. I think this is important to emphasize too, because you mentioned Bree, and also with my own past too, that's rather messy and full of a lot of really like just like more tangible sins. I just want to emphasize that like none of us are too lost or too broken to be saved, to encounter the love of Jesus, to experience friendship with him. Like at the end of the day, I don't care like what you've done, where you come from, you know, whatever. Like the Lord wants friendship with you. He desires, you know, intimacy with you. Again, conversion requires repentance. So like repentance is in the equation. And that is ongoing conversion. We're constantly having to repent and constantly having to ask the Lord for forgiveness, because we're constantly stumbling. But nonetheless, like it's a journey, but it's a beautiful one, and you're invited. Like nobody is exempt. We're all invited. It's just a matter of being willing today to be like, Lord, like I desire this. Like get on your knees, pray that raw prayer, like I did in my bedroom, where it's just like, Jesus, I don't understand you. I doubt you. I don't think you're good. But like if you are, like show me, Lord. Like pray bold prayers, man. Don't be afraid. If you are desperate, then be desperate before the Lord. He wants that. But I just invite whoever you are who's listening, if you feel like you are too lost, or you have that one sin or that one attraction or that one inclination that you're like, oh, like this is just too much or for the Lord, or it's just, you know, it's like respectfully, like, no, like it's not. Like he's not scandalized by you. He's not afraid of you. So, you know, don't be afraid of him. Yeah, it's worth it, guys. It's hard, but it's worth it. The Lord's worth it. Jesus is good. All glory be his. And yeah, say a prayer for me, because the enemy doesn't like this. So I always ask, please pray for me and Amber, and be assured of my prayers for you, whoever you are, listener. That we're on this narrow way together. It's good. So
Yeah, no, that was beautiful, Manny. Thank you so much for being here. Where can my listeners find you?
yeah, so you can find me. I mean, if we're gonna talk about the social media realm, I mean, you can find me on social media if you look up at it's Call Me Manny with 2 extra Y's at the end of Manny, so 3 total. I'm mainly active on Instagram. I'm there. You can also just find my website, What a Beautiful Cross. Usually, if you just Google like What a Beautiful Cross Manny or What a Beautiful Cross Catholic, it comes up. On there, you can find my resources, all the shows I've been on, links to that, as well as like a contact form if you yourself want to reach out, kind of like what Amber was saying for like prayers or, like your own stories, sharing that, or, speaking inquiries or whatever. You can always find me there too. But yeah, if you just Google search like Manny Gonzalez Catholic or whatever, you'll be able to find me. So
yeah, just not the address, because I did have one person. I said, "Where can they find you?" And they started giving their address, and I was like, "No."
Yeah, I will. I will just say now that I, by the grace of God, have developed enough boundaries that I will not give my address to anybody online. That is very personal. So you will not get my address or my social security. So
that's how you know. That's how you know.
That's how you know. So yeah, but
no, yeah. Well, I do really appreciate you coming on, Manny. It's always a pleasure having you on, and hopefully we can have you on again in the future.
Absolutely, friends. You're awesome. God bless you guys.
Thank you. And with all that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys learned something, and I'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Do you have questions or comments about today's episode? Email me at thereligioushippie@gmail.com or leave a voice message at anchor.fm/thereligioushippie. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Amber Rose and distributed by Metacortext Publishing. This podcast is copyright by The Religious Hippie, NFP. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for The Religious Hippie at thereligioushippie.com or find me on social media for other unique content. Thank you.